group that's entered. We will admit people as they keep streaming in over the next minute or two. Molly, I think you're a co-host, so if you could keep an eye on the waiting room, that would be great. So hi everyone, happy Sunday. Welcome to, I think this is called A Taste of Morocco. My name is Laura Elkayam. I am, in my day job, I'm an attorney at a law firm called Much Shellist. I'm in the labor and employment group. In my second job, my husband and I, Rob Ezra Balser, run the base Hillel in the Loop. So I see some familiar faces here on the screen. We work closely with Rabbi Megan, who, along with Molly and others at JUF, have organized the day today. So really excited to be here to give a little bit of perspective on perhaps a part of Jewish culture that some of you may not know much about, some of you may know something about. When Megan approached me to do this and to speak a little bit on what it was like growing up as the daughter of a Moroccan and my life and my culture, I agreed. We were texting briefly. I said, that sounds great. And as this day has inched closer, I've thought to myself, what am I going to talk about today? What do I want to convey? What are my stories? What are some recipes I might share? What are some things I would say? And I said to myself, you know what? I actually know someone who's in a much better position to share this information than I am. And that would be my dad. And so I've asked my dad to join us today, and I'm going to unmute him because I think I muted him right now. Dad, I think you can click unmute. Let's see.
I got it.
Perfect. So I thought who better to hear stories from, information from, perspective from than the man, the myth, the legend, my dad, Isaac. So Dad, thank you for coming today and to let me interview you, so to speak. And so the format that we'll do is I'm gonna basically invite you all to a conversation that I will have with my dad about his background, about the role of food and culture. And as we go along, feel free to raise your hand with a question. Feel free to make this participatory and engaging. You can put questions into the chat, and we'll just kind of talk about his life a little bit and his perspective on this topic. So without further ado, we will get started. So Dad, this is the first time I've interviewed you in front of people that we don't know. So this should be a very fun time together. So why don't you take a few minutes and just share a little bit about who you are and just some basic background about how you made it all the way from Casablanca to this country.
All right. So as she said, I am the proud father of Laura Elkayam. My name is Isaac Elkayam. And I was born in Casablanca, Morocco in 1944. And at the age of 17, I made my aliyah to Israel. There I stayed for about 13 years. And from there, I came to this country. So basically, I lived in 3 different countries. The short of it was Israel, and the longest was the United States. Basically, Morocco is very different from any other country that you may have visited or known some way or another. And it is different because the Jews over there, for instance, when they lived in Morocco at the time, right after World War II, an estimation of anywhere from 250 to 350,000 Jews lived in Morocco. And for the most part, very peacefully, as Morocco was extremely accommodating to the Jews that lived in there. Laura, I don't know how long you want me to talk about this.
Yeah, you can just, go ahead, keep talking.
All right.
I'll interrupt you like I do in our real life all the time.
Well, I don't have to remind you the story of the Jews throughout the ages, really how they've been all persecuted, and Morocco was no exception, except that Morocco, for the most part, really because of the king, Morocco is a monarchy, by the way, to the day. So because of the king being very favorable to the Jews, somewhat the Jews over there were immune from any persecution that like they experience elsewhere in the world. And in fact, as the World War II was unfolding, French was occupying most of Africa, chiefly Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. And as such, there was some very, very malevolent government in France, under the Vichy government. And because the French were occupying Morocco, Vichy came onto the king and asked him to basically export all the Jews to France, so from there they can be exported to the gas chambers and on. The Moroccan king answer to that was, we don't have any Jews in Morocco, we have only Moroccans. And that way, it really avoided, the Jews being exported to their demise. So from there, we're going to go and talk about how the Aliyah from Morocco to Israel, and like Laura mentioned before, if you want, we can dwell into the cooking and on and on.
Well, Dad, before you talk about the Aliyah, I have a question. So Morocco was relatively friendly as you were growing up. Did that mean that you were completely integrated with all of the other citizens? Did the Jews live in their own isolated communities but were left alone? What was the interaction between the Jews and the general?
Well, there was full harmony between the Jews and the Muslims in Morocco, unlike any other countries, really. But like any other place in the world, it's not 100% proof, really. There were instances where the Jews were being like mistreated by the Moroccans, but those are the exceptions, not the rule. Like I said, the king of Morocco to the day really was very protective of the Jews, and in fact he had many Jews being in his administration, so to speak. And so we lived very peacefully until, like I said, when the state of Israel was being proclaimed, then the rules of the game changed really all throughout.
Okay, so tell us a little about how that changed. What happened when 1948 came around?
Okay, so without being political, because I don't want to insert politics into this discussion in here, and there is no need for it, when the state of Israel was becoming a state, Ben Gurion, obviously, whoever knows the history of the birth of Israel, Ben Gurion at the time was at the helm of things. And it was very crucial for Israel to have the Jews come in from all over the world, to settle the country. Otherwise, what's the sense in having a country without any people being able to defend it and to work for it and make it prosperous? So, but the vision of Ben Gurion at the time was not really to bring anybody but the Jews from Europe. He strictly wanted the state of Israel being settled, nothing but the Jews from Europe. His vision was that after the Holocaust, whatever was left of the Jews in Europe will be hurrying up to go to Israel to find some refuge over there and not experience anymore, the atrocities that they did back where they were. Except that vision did not come to fruition because the Jews from Europe decided either to stay put or go somewhere else, be it in America or be it somewhere else where they felt like Canada, where they felt safe. And Israel was at their back of their mind, really did not happen. And so Ben Gurion and his entourage over there began to really losing their mind as to how to settle the country. And finally, they came up with the idea that they had no other option but to call on the Jews from all over the world, thus calling on the Jews from Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Yemen, Iraq, and on and on and on. So that's what happened at the time, really. And from here, you can see that the agencies, in Israel that were responsible for the Aliyah came to all those places I just mentioned right now, and to Morocco consequently. And now what you see is that the Moroccans are dwindling little by little from the country and making their way to Israel, either in the open or clandestinely. So for instance, I was living in a building that comprised maybe about 10 families, 3-story building, with about an average of 3 families to a story. And because we lived in the upper floor, we were privy to see all what was happening below us, as the spaces were pretty much open, and you could see what was going on below you. Now, when it comes to food, for instance, let me just say that by virtue of being kosher, for instance, you are very careful about what to cook with what, and what kind of utensils you're going to be using versus the one that you should not. And so you are always aware of the food that you are handling and how you're going to go about cooking it. So now imagine, say, like Friday night dinner, for instance, which was like 10 families deciding to cook Friday night dinner. The fish, for instance, was something that always went onto Friday night dinner. So imagine 10 families, perhaps chronologically, with the stopper in their hands, deciding to cook the fish at the same time on Friday afternoon or towards the evening. And now you have the aroma of the fish going on from 3 floors, 10 families, all the way up to the upper floor where I was living. And me, smelling all that kind of flavors, that were emanating from those houses. Same thing was going on in the holidays, whereby, let's say, Sukkot. So everybody was building a sukkah wherever they were. Everybody was cooking. Everybody was chanting the prayers and all that. And you heard them, as you were, whatever you were in the building, So you heard the prayers, sometimes all at once, sometimes sporadically. But that was the experience that I had as a kid, really being in Morocco.
Okay, so Dad, you're smelling people cooking in the top floor. I know that you were quite a mischievous young man running around town with, schemes and tricks and all sorts of games. At what point did you yourself, if at all, enter into the kitchen and actually roll your sleeves up to do anything? Were you just watching Safta?
I never did in Morocco, really. I never experienced cooking myself over there. But since I was a little kid, people would talk about me having like a very sharp eye, being very, very good observer and making decisions on the spot, really, and basically learning languages. So today, I'm very proud to say that I speak 5 languages, some fluently, some not so, and 3 of them chiefly being the Hebrew, French, and English, and the other ones would be the Moroccan Arabic that we learned as we were living there, and some of the Middle East as I came to Israel. So I catch up pretty well, very fast, things that I'm about to do or I never did, but I'm learning how to do it. And once I do it once or twice, then the rest is history, really. I mean,
so did you watch Safta, your mom, cook and just remember the things?
Yes, but not as you see it today, for instance. I mean, you would watch him as on the go, so to speak, really. I mean, I did not sit and watch from beginning to end. And just because the same dishes were repeated time and again, as the years went by. So always the same Friday night and all the same holidays and this and that and that. So it was inevitable not to see it and not to smell it and not to, be aware of it.
Okay, so everyone's making pretty much the same, let's say 15, 20 dishes on rotation in Morocco.
Right.
How did anyone excel and rise to the top? Like, did anyone say, oh, wow, Safta, Sima Elkayam makes the best khameen, or so-and-so makes the best this? Was there variation across dishes, or was everyone pretty much making the exact same thing?
Yeah, but to whom? Who would be the one to say whether she was making something good? I was within the family, basically the family. We didn't have the luxury of like having Shabbatot like we do in this country, whereby at any given time you can see 20 or 30 people around the table enjoying the same dinner. Over there within the family, so it would be probably me, my father, or my aunt, or somebody complimenting, either my mother, my grandmother, whoever was, responsible for cooking.
Yeah. Yes. So one of my favorite dishes that you make since growing up is something called khameen, which for anyone who is not familiar is the word. It's essentially referring to cholent, if you've heard of cholent before, but it's prepared in a slightly different way, where instead of it being a stew, all of the elements of the khameen are separated in their own little areas and containers of the pot. It slow cooks overnight, beginning on Friday. So that it can be eaten on Saturday. And you've shared with me before that everyone in Casablanca, I assume it was only Jews that were making khameen because others weren't prohibited from cooking on Saturday. And everyone brought their khameen to some sort of communal oven in the village. Can you explain how that worked and who would know which khameen was which?
Correct, because at the time in Morocco, you're talking about the 40s and 50s and somewhat through the 60s, you know, we didn't have the luxury of even like a fridge in the house or even like an oven as we do today. So how to cook? We basically had like some earthenware type of dishes and somewhat some makeshift type of a barbecue, a little barbecue that you put charcoals in it. Most of the cooking was done with charcoals, which made the food, by the way, a lot more palatable than what you see today in the modern times, really. But when it comes to Friday, like you said, you know, it was prohibitive to cook on, you know, in a household on Friday night or Saturday morning. So we would prepare the bread and the khameen, like you so explained, and we'll take it to this community oven, which was like a pizza oven, except for much bigger. And the guy over there who was basically illiterate, I mean, he didn't know how to write or read, he will have this mechanism which he used to take all the bread coming basically on a how you say, a piece of plywood or whatever else that you can carry the bread in it, and he shove it into the oven over there, put the platter on the side over there, and then at the end, when it was cooked, he will be skilled enough to put the exact same bread that come onto the same exact platter that came onto it. And then us as kids our job will be to go back there and pick it up once it was cooked. The same was for the cholent. You prepare the cholent into a pot and you bring it over there, and you will mark the pot like you would mark today a suitcase going into the airplane, so you can recognize it, because there were so many over there. You're talking about 20, 30, 40 different families doing the same thing. So when you go there, you have to be able to somewhat spot your pot according to the sign that you put on it, be it with something, you know, written on it with charcoal, with the chalk or something like that. So that's the way it was. And you boom, you dismantle it and you serve it. And
so take us through like a standard Friday night dinner, standard Shabbat dinner. I know now that you, in our modern life here, when you make Shabbat dinner for our guests or for us, we're talking 3, 4, 5 different courses. And we can talk about that more in a bit, but tell us what it looked like back then. What was your standard Friday night Shabbat dinner?
Well, first of all, Laura, things at the time were pretty scarce with them. I mean, the luxury to afford like meat every day of the week was non-existent for some families. Obviously, there were the affluents also could permit themselves to have meat and all the good things, you know, throughout the whole week. There are some houses who used to have the fridge and used to have the stove and the stovetop and all that, and cook within their households without having to do what I just described to you right now. Granted, those were the affluent people, you know, the Jews to be well and all that. Not that we were not ourselves. We didn't grow up being needing basically most of the things that life can offer. But then again, you know, like I said, we were living in a neighborhood that did not offer such a luxury as frigidaires and ovens and things like that. And the cooking was done pretty much the same as in the other families, really. And if you ask me, because I experienced both, situations in different houses, and our food, believe me, was a lot more appreciated than the ones being done with certain
technologies.
Technology, yes.
Okay, so you're sitting down Friday night dinner. You have, let's see, your 6 siblings sitting around with you.
7 siblings.
7 total, no? You plus 6.
Well, Yafa, the youngest one, was born pretty much before my parents' medallion at age.
Okay. So you're sitting down Friday nights. What is served to you?
Well, typically Friday night, the father will stand up and do the prayer for the wine, like we do in here. He'll do the geffen, and he'll do the prayer for the bread, and then everybody will sit and eat. The meal will consist chiefly of the fish. Like I said, the fish was something you cannot do without on Friday night. So it would be the fish. It would be some kind of a meat, being meatballs, being some, and with vegetables. I mean, Morocco was really very, very rich in vegetables and fruits and all that. So by virtue of us,
Is this the fish?
this is the fish that we make nowadays.
Is it the same as you used to eat?
Yeah, but obviously back then it was not as big as this and as luxurious as this, really. But the basics were there, Laura. I mean, I did not lose the touch. Even though the internet today, and all the technology they offer gazillion type of recipes, I stick with the original. I never deviated from it, really. I mean,
Okay.
friends will always take me back to the days when I was in Morocco, thereafter in Israel, and that's the way I cooked, and that's the way I will cook to the rest of my life, really, and I will not change it.
Okay, so bread, fish. What else do we have at the Shabbat dinner table?
Well, like I said, for it'd be some vegetables cooked with meat or with meatballs, and it would be some olives. Olives are very, very popular in Morocco. Thereafter in Israel, olives again. It could be with chicken, it could be with meat, and things like the salads. The salads was the most important. Like I said, because there was an abundance of vegetables and fruits, so the salads will be integrated into the dinner.
And when you say salads, you don't mean iceberg lettuce and carrots.
No.
So what do you mean when you say a salad?
For those who understand the terms of the salads in Israel, it would be the matbucha, it would be the carrots, it would be the red beets, it would be the eggplants, it would be all kinds of things like that, the way they do them in Israel as well.
So these are cooked salads.
Cooked.
And these are probably the most labor-intensive items on the menu, I would say. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Yes. So matbucha, for example, for anyone who has come across it on a trendy new Moroccan restaurant, you'll see it all over, is the Moroccan, cooked pepper and tomato salad. This is like a red, it's not
most elaborate and tedious.
This is the most elaborate and tedious that we include in our meals. Now, Dad, I know people come to me and say, how do you make it? Yeah. And I sort of laugh in the back of my mind. I know you do too, because there's no way in hell anyone's going to make this from scratch. But
well, the most difficult thing, when somebody, let's say in here, for instance, when they ask you about how did you make it, the problem being is that you make everything with the right spice, really. Without the spice, nothing is made whatsoever. And my kitchen in here, the spices that I have really date to the Middle Ages sometimes, really, in name and quality. And so most households in this country do not have the same amount and the same variety
type of spices, right?
Spices that I have in here. So it's difficult for me to tell them, make it, A, B, C, D, without mentioning the spices that go into the food,
Right. Dad,
Yeah, I'll guide them to go to certain stores to seek for those kind of spices so they can make it happen.
So someone has asked if you had sliced oranges for dessert.
I would be laughing probably.
No, did you eat sliced oranges as dessert in Morocco?
No.
No? What about candied oranges?
No.
No? Okay.
Non-existent really at the time.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's fast forward now. You've moved to Israel. What year did you make Aliyah?
Well, it was a bit intricate for me really to explain this because my Aliyah was not like any others. At the time I used to work for my uncle who was pretty well to be in Morocco. And when came the time for my family to immigrate to Israel, he was adamant about letting me go with them. And so he pleaded with my mom, who was his sister, and assured her that if I stayed back in Morocco with him, he would take care of me for the rest of my life, really. And so she succumbed to the begging of him, and they left without me, and I stayed behind, for at least a couple of years, until tragically my firstborn brother was killed in the army in Israel, and then I was so heartbroken that I made Aliyah myself, not in a fashion of Aliyah, but rather my uncle had bought me a ticket to go, a round trip ticket to go to Morocco, visit with the family, with a promise that I will be back to him. And that promise I never really kept. Not that I gave it to him anyways, but I did not go back to Morocco. That was my aliyah, so to speak. And I stayed in Israel after that, really.
So where did you live when you arrived in Israel? How did that get decided?
My family lived in Ma'alot. They were being installed in Ma'alot. Now there is a story going on with Aliyah in Israel, really, some of which are very funny, some are not so. And the Jews in Morocco, for instance, before they leave Morocco, they have certain stipulations to the Sukhnut, who was responsible to take them over. What was the stipulation? For instance, somebody will say to them, I have family living in Haifa, and I would like to be with them. Such thing will never happen, really, because, like I said in the beginning of my speaking, Israel needed to settle the country, and they could not afford having everybody living in the big cities. The crucial task was to have people scattered all over. And so, like for instance, when finally either the boat arrived in Haifa or the plane landed in, I don't know exactly what airport was at the time, probably the old Ben Gurion and all that. So the people over there, they will not get off the bus. They needed to go to Haifa, to the beach, because their family lived in Haifa. And so what would the bus driver who brought them over to Ma'alot, which is far away from there, what would he do? He will take him for a ride. Okay, you want to go to the beach? I'll take you to the beach. And he was behaving as if he was really, really acquiescing to their demands, So he'll take the bus and he'll ride hours and hours until the sundown, and he'll go back to wherever he started, And he will tell them to get off the bus because he finally arrived at the destination that they wanted. And so they go to the places that were designated for them to live. And the day after, they will get up, everybody with a beach towel, everybody with the flip-flops, looking for the beach that they never found, really, or miles and miles away from it. But the trick was done, and there was no way to reverse course, really, because that's the way it was to be, and that's the way it was.
Someone asked if you are a dual citizen or a citizen of U.S., Israel, and Morocco. Are you citizen of all three?
I'm not in Morocco anymore, I don't think, because I've been away from Morocco for like 60 years now. So therefore there is no Moroccan, even though if I go there, I can probably reclaim it now that Morocco had officially made peace with Israel. So I can reclaim my citizenship. I don't think they give me any hard time. But I do have a dual citizenship between, with Israel and the States.
So let me fast forward now to you arriving in the United States. So you spent some time in Israel. And
can I dwell in Israel for?
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your experience.
What I did in Israel, that's very important as well,
Yes.
So jobs in Israel were very scarce. At the time, we're talking about 1963 when I first landed in Israel. And like I said, the jobs were pretty scarce, really. A lot of protection in Israel. What's the meaning of protection? In other words, unless you were Polish, unless you were, some kind of European this or that, you will not be landing a very, very decent job. And therefore they give you some other, I don't want to use any profanities in here, but some rather, screwy job, such as working the land and planting trees and on, which was very, very hard at the time, especially for somebody coming from urban cities, like I did. After all, Casablanca was no different than Chicago or Tel Aviv for that matter. And now I'm finding myself, working the land and all that, coming after a hard day of labor with my hands full of blisters and all that, But it didn't take long for me to decide that was not, the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life. So I was seeking for another job. And lo and behold, one day I got up with a movie theater and I find this huge sign asking for people to enroll into the police forces in Israel. Well, to me, it was like any other job. So I went and I decided I want to be a cop. Perhaps not out of ideology, but out of necessity, really, because he had to support the family and all that. And I needed some job that will provide me with a steady income. And so I went inside over there I registered myself, went through a short test, and the next thing I knew that it was a Friday. The next thing I knew, on Sunday, I was on my way to the academy. And I became a cop, and I was a cop for about 11 years. And after that, I quit, and that's where I came to this country.
Okay, so these are some of my favorite food stories that you tell me. So when you were a cop, tell me a little bit about what foods you were eating, where you were stationed, how you were interacting with the population there, and what your fridge looked like at the time, including some of those shady poker stories.
All right. So when I became a cop, basically the country of Israel at the time was in dire need for cops to be in the big cities, for instance, because there was not enough manpower to really settle the police forces, chiefly in Tel Aviv. Really, that's where they needed most of the people to work. And because I was a bachelor at the time, naturally they give priorities to people who were married, to somewhat serve next to their families, so they're not separated from them. But if you were to be a bachelor like me, then you had no other issue but to go to the place that they designated for you. Such a place was Tel Aviv at the time. So fresh out of the academy, I was sent to Tel Aviv, and I worked there for about maybe a couple of years. And again, I found myself, in dire need to transfer myself from Tel Aviv, because my brother and I, by the way, he too, Joe, who sadly enough passed away a few years back, he decided to become a cop. And so the two of us were cops in Tel Aviv, making each one salary, but going back home to the family with only one, because we had to survive in Tel Aviv for the time that we were there, and spend like one salary between the two of us, and going back home only with one to provide for the family. That did not go both very well with me, and I decided I'll have to do anything possible to really get away from Tel Aviv and go back next to my house. I succeeded after all kind of wrangling and whatnot, and I went and I worked in next to Ma'alot, next to my family over there. And after that, I heard that they were enrolling police officers to the West Bank, chiefly to Shechem, in other words, to Nablus, what they call it nowadays. And so I went there, and I spent the last 5 years of my service in the police forces in Nablus. Well, that's an experience really that quite very few go through, as you are in a sea of Muslims in there. But those were peaceful times really, because I landed over there in 1970 throughout 75, which was basically after the 6-Day War, but throughout the 73 Yom Kippur War. We used to live in Nablus for like 3 or 4 days, and then you go for furlough a weekend, and then the next weekend you'll be working, and on and on. One weekend you work, the other way you go home. The nights that we used to be there, you had to spend them somehow or another. I mean, it's not always just come back from the street where you worked all day and you go back and you put your head on the pillow. It has to be some kind of entertainment, to keep yourself insane. Otherwise, you go berserk really. So what was the entertainment back in Nablus in the evenings? Well, playing poker obviously was one of the attractions, but it was not always with a happy ending. Some people over there had lost their shirt, and people who had families, sadly enough, they would go back home with less money than otherwise not playing poker. I happened to meet somebody over there who became not only my best friend, but a brother to me. And we met on a poker table. He slaughtered me the first night, and the second, and the third. And at the end, out of mercy, he called me on the side and he says to me, "You know what? You are not a poker player, and if you are, you will never survive the nights over here. So let me just propose to you something. Why don't you become my partner, and then I'll play the cards, and you manage all the accounts. Whoever owes me money, whoever this or that, you'll be the secretary of our enterprise in here." And so I did. Initially I give him let's say the equivalent of $1 to be his partner, and I never give him another penny on top of that. And every night after he plays poker, he will come to me as if I was his pimp, and he'll give me whatever proceeds were from that night. And from there on, I never, ever know what not having money was about, really, because I always had money. And so he and I really, we became extremely good friends, him being married, me not so. And we pursued that friendship to the day that he finally died about 5 or 6 years ago, sadly enough, you know. But even being separated with so many miles, me being here and him being there, we always kept in touch. And we obviously, countless time I visited in Israel, I'll be the first one to go there, stayed in his house first, and thereafter go to my own. And that's the kind of friendship I would wish for everyone really who's seeking one.
So, Dad, I know that you've told me many times about
My
the beautiful.
kids refer to him as their uncle.
Yes. And by the way, with all the proceeds, they would throw parties that included
God.
fish, nuts, dates, all the delicacies that anyone could ask for. So I only have.
Well, you think that you go to Israel and this Eretz HaKodesh, you know, over there, you're going to become the most religious person in the world. Some did not. I came from Morocco when I was very religious. I mean, to the extent that my father had taught us how to be, you know, we used to be like ducklings following my father to the shul in Morocco, you know, as little kids. And over there, the shul was way different than the ones in here. No kiddushes to speak of, anything like that. But then again, there used to be bar mitzvot, there used to be weddings, and on and on. Once I got to Israel and I became a cop, all that was forgotten, really. That's it. Life in Israel had taught me that there is no room for, you know, to be religious and being a cop at the same time. After I quit the police, I went to the army, and I did my service as a what do you call it, the miluim, which is the
Reserves.
The reserves, yes. And there it was even worse, really. I mean, there is no room for being religious in the army or in the police forces, you know. Today, fortunately, you know, you can afford, you know. I never saw a cop with a yarmulke on his head, for God's sakes. I mean, let alone with a beard, let alone with a talit sticking out of his uniform, you know. But today, obviously, they are permitted to do that, which is great. If you ask me, you know, that's.
So, Dad, I'm gonna fast forward. We're gonna do another like 5 minutes talking about your time here in the States, and then we'll have time if people have questions, or we'll end a little early, whatever suits everyone. So, you eventually moved to the States. You may not say this about yourself because you're humble, but you've developed a reputation among your community, among everyone who knows you, that you're the best cook in town. As an example, your synagogue had an auction a few years ago where they were auctioning off you cooking a dinner party for 10, and there was a bidding war that went up until $10,000, until finally they said to him, please, will you agree to do both dinner parties? Of course you said yes, but just to give everyone a sense of your reputation and how it's unfolded in this country. I'm curious, when you first came here and you were so accustomed to eating the foods that you were eating in either Casablanca or similar cuisine in Israel, what happened when you moved here? I mean, what did you think of the food in this country? How did you use your own food and your own cooking to sort of make your way here?
Okay. So how did I get to America to begin with? My brother Joe, well, at the time in Israel, after the 6-day war, there were a lot of volunteers coming from all over the world to help the Israelis overcome the war for once, and then help basically in the education. You know, like the young ladies over there will go to kindergartens, they go to elementary schools and all that to help the teachers overcome the pressures and all the whatever the war was bringing at the time. And so one of the girls over there had met my brother Joe, and the two of them went into a romantic type of relationship, which ended up being married. And as it so happened, she was a Chicagoan. So when they got married, they made Aliyah to Chicago. I mean, he made Aliyah to Chicago. She went back home. And after he landed over here, it didn't take long, you know, before he began to court me into coming and joining him. You know, as he was saying at the time, we are such a vast family that they can afford losing one to come and join me, as I am alone by myself in here. So it was really somewhat very appealing to me at the time. I think I've seen what I had to see in Israel. And even though I love the country over there, I've always wanted to see other parts of the world, really. And so I hopped on a plane and I came to this country and I joined my brother. Yeah, the other, after 2-3 years, I went on my own and I began to work for this fairly large company dealing with all kind of closeouts and all that. And then I met my wife, Judy. We got married. We got married and we had 2 wonderful daughters, one of them being Laura. And then the cooking for me anyways, came as out of necessity at first and thereafter out of prestige, like you so described. Once you have people tasting your food and looking at you with envy and telling you how good it is and all that, well, obviously everybody likes to hear compliments, being in cooking or doing something else in life. Everybody likes that. And when you like that, then you promote it and you make it better and on and on and on. But let me tell you, Laura, like I said in the beginning of my talk, without the spices, I wouldn't be nothing in cooking. The spice is the one thing that makes a cook a good cook. Without them, forget it. So I can put 3 pieces of chicken right now, 3 pieces of chicken on the left, in the middle, and on the right. And I'll cook one with 1 spice, I'll cook one with different spice, I'll cook one with 3rd spice, and obviously you're gonna see the difference between one and the other. Like I said, I try to keep the old-fashioned spices that I once knew in Morocco, thereafter in Israel, and now in the States. In the early years, when I used to go to Israel, I would take with me 2 suitcases. For the most part, I used to go by myself. Before the kids, I used to go by myself. And then one will have my personal things, and the other one will be full of gifts for the family, friends, and whomever. And then on the way back, I'll bring my suitcase with my belongings, and the other suitcase, which was empty by now, would be full of spices. All kinds of spices, bring them with me. Today, thank God, there are so many available, be it in the internet or in local kosher stores or whatever, So I really don't need to bring with me from Israel nothing anymore. Israel is very, very sophisticated when it comes to that. They have everything. The Moroccans in Israel, from having a hardship in the early years, now they are fully integrated into the country. And by all accounts, there is like more than 1 million of them, roaming around big cities and whatnot. And they are having very good time in Israel. Their cooking is very, very well publicized in all of the links in Israel. So if you wish to know how to cook something or another, you don't need me, basically, unless you want to go into the very, very little details into doing something. Then the internet can offer you a multitude of recipes that you can enjoy. Really.
So, Dad, thank you for all of this information. I just thought people might enjoy seeing a picture of you as a young lad. This is, I believe, your Moroccan passport.
That's right.
And so I think we have about 10 or 15 minutes left, and this might be a good time for some questions. If anyone has questions, feel free to chime in. Well, we have some in the chat here. How can we eat great Moroccan food? Do you have restaurant or recipe recommendations? Any recipes available? Uh-oh.
Restaurant. Talking about a restaurant, like I said, at the beginning, when I lived in Morocco with those 10 families, those were 10 restaurants, all right, each on his own, cooking their meals and driving up in the air for me to smell all of them. There were 10 families, the equivalent of 10 restaurants cooking at one time. But when I came to this country, really, because of being a member to the shul and them knowing that I was cooking and all that, my cooking gets so intensive, and much more, elaborate than it used to be, just cooking for one family. Now I'm cooking for maybe like, Laura explained to them the pre-marriage, the henna
So before a wedding, there's a Moroccan custom to have a henna party, which is basically like a pre-wedding celebration that involves lots and lots of food, and also involves marking the hand of the bride and groom and the guests with henna. So you might have seen henna tattoos have become popular. Indian culture uses henna. So it's like an ink that you put on your hand. And so
The symbol of prosperity and good luck and all that, you know, that's the meaning of it.
yeah, so after our henna, meaning my henna with my husband, that you obviously cooked for a couple hundred people, our close family friends who are also Moroccan got wind of this operation. And so you ended up cooking, what, 3 or 4 henna parties in the last, say,
About 5 or 6.
5 or 6 in the last 6
Well,
years
there
alone.
was you and Rebecca, that's my own, and then there was Sammy and Rita and Emily and Stephanie and Jeremy. So yeah, about 7 or 8.
So you've learned how to produce at scale, I would say.
Well, you have to be, when you cook, not only you have to learn, but you have to be systematic. You know, you have to be very, very organized. You know, there is no way you can cook in a sea of mess. You know, the more principled you are, and the more how you say neat that you are in the kitchen, the outcome will be much better than otherwise. Let me submit to you, really. And so you do your shopping, you do your list like anything else. You know, how many people you're going to be entertaining. You figure out, you know, how many pieces of this or that. And then once you get it together, maybe at first you're going to be flanking, you know, in the first experience. But as you go along, you're going to learn not to the next time. And then you you know, as you go along, you perfect what you do, really. And especially when people keep coming to you and telling you how good. Now, let me tell you a story about this briefly, Laura.
Yeah, what are we looking at here?
All right. This is shakshuka in you know, in about a couple hundred eggs over there, I think, with some maybe 100 tomatoes or 200. I can't remember. In this instance, in here, Moriah, our shul, is hosting the art fair from Israel once every 2 years. And so that entails really of the artists coming to our shul and displaying all their goods, you know, into the sanctuary and outside of it. And so this time around, this year, whoever was responsible for the hosting came to me before the end of it, and he says, Isaac, you know, there are about 60 or so Israeli artists who are leaving Monday morning. Would you be inclined to make like breakfast for them the Sunday before that? Without blinking an eye, I said yes, and I went on to make this for them. This is the shakshuka, and beyond that, you know, the other table over there, they hired, the shul also hired another what do you call it, another caterer who was responsible to make something a lot less
enticing.
No, not enticing, but something of the health type of healthy type of nuance, you know, be it like fruits and milkshakes and crepes and stuff like that, which was pretty presentable if you ask me. And now we have one with shakshuka, which is the emphasis of the other one over there, and the people are walking by. So you would say that the men who know what shakshuka is all about will hop onto my table, and the ladies who obviously are more interested in keeping up their shape, you know, they go to the other table. But as they sit on the table and they see the men eating basically with their fingers, you know, dipping into the shakshuka and enjoying every bit of it, whereby they, with a fork and knife, cutting into a piece of melon and somewhat smiling. But before you knew it, the ladies got the idea, you know, the idea about the shakshuka. And believe me, the ladies in Israel, they know what shakshuka is, except like I said, you know, they just don't want to lose their I don't know, their regiment, you know, being very aware of their diets or something. But it didn't take much longer for them to, you know, U-turn and come back to the table with the shakshuka and clean it, you know, sweep it clean, really. So
amazing.
Funny.
Let's see. Someone asked, we have what, about 5 more minutes, Molly? Someone asked if you experienced discrimination as a Jew in Morocco.
Undoubtedly. like I said, for the most part, you know, the Jews were very well integrated in Morocco, but there are always the odd pieces over there, you know, the odd people who will, just for the sake of you being Jew, you'll be going on the street with the yarmulke on your head and somebody will come and smack you in the face. But there was nothing in the open. In other words, there were not some politicians that would go on and talk about anti-Semitism and all that, because the king will not allow that to happen. So yes, there were a few instances here and there, you know, whereby the Jews were mistreated, but I wouldn't make that a case, really.
Someone asked what the pictures behind you are.
Well, unfortunately, that's the wall of lamentations, really, the wall of the tears, as I call it, you know, which reflects all the dead people in my family, you know, from early ages to the day, really. So, and that of mom as well.
And I think the Shabbat candles are right underneath them that you can't see. So that's typically where you light Shabbat. Mom lights Shabbat candles.
You don't see them? Yeah.
Yep, there they are. It's a nice gallery wall, though.
Yeah. Well, Laura, tradition is extremely important in maintaining a family in good shape, really. And I, from what I say, I'm extremely proud that you're doing it, and your sister is doing the same, really, keeping the tradition. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you that Laura is as a good cook as I am. You know, I'm proud to say. I mean, she has done some cooking of her own, and I have nothing but admiration for her. So.
Thanks, Dad. All right, any other questions before we wrap up? Well, you two have given us a wonderful gift.
Anna Sanchez is waving, Laura.
Anna Sanchez is waving. I don't know if she's waving at us.
Maybe she's making some exercises. I don't know.
Okay, so I think we will call it a wrap. Dad, thank you so much for joining us today.
I enjoyed it very much. My pleasure.
I think one last quick question people have is, what are some of the spices to always have on hand?
Well, we have, okay,
Hold on.
we're going into the kitchen, ladies and gentlemen, the belly of the beast.
Well, see, now here you may see the pan, you know, but behind it you're gonna see all these are Israeli spices. Everything in here is Israeli spices. The Morocco, see, the consomme here. This is one extremely important. This is the paprika, what I call the coarse paprika in here, which is extremely important in Moroccan cooking, and on and on. The turmeric, the meatball spice. I mean, you name it.
I'm gonna put the a link to the paprika in the.
Well, if anybody is interested, Laura, I can make a picture of the basic what you call them spices, and you can promote it anywhere you want.
That sounds great, Dad. If you take a picture of the basic spices, and if anyone's interested in more information about any recipes, you can send me an email to that email down below. We have a lot of vegetarian recipes, meat recipes, and about every recipe can be modified for about any diet you wish. And that's it. I mean, we really express our love to people through food. We express our love for each other through food. And, you know, the greatest gift, you've given me many gifts, Dad. This is only just one tip of the iceberg. So the gift of being able to feed the people that you love in your community and to share your soul with them has been such an amazing thing for me to learn from you.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Okay, well, I wish everyone a great day. Feel free again to reach out if you have any follow-up questions for my dad, for me. He's way more interesting than I am. So you can send me an email with questions for him. And Molly, thank you for organizing this. And
thank you, Molly. Thank you. It was a pleasure, really.
Okay.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Bye, everyone.